The candles on my father's 70th birthday cake hadn't even been blown out when he slid a manila folder across the white tablecloth and told me to sign my life away. I stared at the folder like it was a snake about to strike. The wax from the candles dripped onto the linen, forming small red puddles that looked like blood. My father, Harold Vance, sat at the head of the table with the smug authority of a man who had never once questioned his own decisions. He didn't look at me when he spoke. He looked at my younger sister, Chloe, seated on his right like a princess in waiting, her manicured fingers wrapped around a champagne flute she didn't deserve. "Sign it, Emma," he said, pushing the folder closer to my plate. "Just transfer the shop to your sister. It's the right thing to do." The words didn't register at first. They bounced off my skull like pebbles against glass. I had been running Vance Woodwork since I was 15 years old. 15. That was the year my mother died and my father fell apart, the year I stopped being a child and became the backbone of a business that was hemorrhaging money and clients. I remembered the smell of sawdust clinging to my hair every night. I remembered the blisters on my hands that turned into calluses that turned into scars. I remembered skipping prom to finish a custom order for a client who threatened to sue if we were late. And now, at 32, after 20 years of blood and sweat and tears I never let anyone see, my father wanted me to hand it all over to Chloe. The girl who had never held a chisel. The girl who had never woken up at 4 a.m. to fire up the kiln. The girl who had never once asked me how my day was, let alone offered to help. "Dad," I said, my voice barely a whisper. The restaurant around us was elegant, the kind of place where people whispered and silverware clinked like distant wind chimes. I had paid for half of this dinner. I had paid for the cake. I had paid for the custom-made cufflinks I'd given him an hour ago, engraved with the Vance Woodworks logo that I had designed myself. I don't understand. Why would I transfer the shop to Chloe? She doesn't know anything about woodworking. Chloe let out a soft, theatrical sigh. "Emma, don't be dramatic. I can learn. It's not rocket science. You just cut wood and glue it together, right?" I felt something hot and sharp twist in my chest. "You just cut wood and glue it together," I repeated, my voice climbing an octave. "Is that what you think I do? Is that what you think I've been doing for 20 years? My father raised a hand, silencing me like I was a barking dog. "Enough, Emma. Chloe needs a fresh start. She's been through a difficult time." Difficult time. Chloe's difficult time consisted of a failed attempt at becoming an influencer, a maxed-out credit card that my father had quietly paid off last Christmas, and a string of boyfriends who had all been toxic and misunderstood. Meanwhile, I had been through actual difficult times. I had weathered the 2008 recession when our orders dropped by 70%. I had personally delivered furniture in a borrowed pickup truck when our delivery driver quit. I had nursed the business back to health while my father sat in his recliner and watched golf. "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You can't be serious. This shop is my life. I built it. I took out loans in my name. I expanded the product line. I created the brand that's now recognized across 3 states. You can't just take it away and give it to Chloe because she needs a fresh start." Aunt Rose, who had been sitting quietly on my left, reached over and placed a clammy hand on my arm. "Emma, honey, let's not make a scene. It's your father's birthday. We can discuss this later, in private." "There's nothing to discuss," my father said, his voice hardening. "The decision is made. Chloe is family. You've had your time, Emma. You're a survivor. You always land on your feet. She's delicate. She needs this more than you do." The word delicate hit me like a slap. Delicate. Chloe was delicate because she had never been asked to be anything else. I was strong because I had been forced to be. And now my strength was being used against me, weaponized to justify the theft of everything I had worked for. I looked around the table. My brother Mark, who had always been their father's shadow, was nodding along like a bobblehead. "It's just a workshop, sis. You can find something else. You're talented. He said talented the way you'd describe a dog that could fetch a stick. My Aunt Rose was giving me the same pitying look she'd given me at my mother's funeral. And Chloe was smiling, a small, secret smile that didn't reach her eyes, the smile of someone who had already won and was just waiting for the losing party to admit defeat. Just a workshop, I echoed, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Just a workshop. I spent 20 years in that building, Dad. 20 years. I missed birthdays and holidays and weddings. I missed my own life so that I could build something for this family. And now you want me to just hand it over? My father leaned forward, his eyes cold and hard. You will sign the papers, Emma. You will not be selfish. This is what your mother would have wanted. The room went silent. The mention of my mother was a nuclear bomb, and my father had just detonated it. My mother, who had taught me how to sand a tabletop until it was smooth as glass. My mother, who had believed in me when no one else did. My mother, who had died too young, leaving me with nothing but a silver locket and a legacy of love for the craft. And then I saw it. Tucked beneath Chloe's designer blouse, glinting in the candlelight. A thin silver chain holding a small, worn locket. My mother's locket. The only thing she'd left to me. The only tangible piece of her I had left in the world. Where did you get that? I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Chloe's hand flew to her neck, clutching the locket defensively. I found it in your old dresser when you moved out. It's just an old thing, Emma. It suits me better, don't you think? My father nodded approvingly. It should stay in the family. It belongs to a Vance woman. You can have it back if you sign the papers. I stared at him, my mind struggling to process the depth of the betrayal. They weren't just taking my shop. They were holding my mother's memory hostage. They were auctioning off the last piece of her I had, using it as leverage to force me into submission. No, I said, the word coming out louder than I intended. No, I will not sign anything. I will not give you my shop, and I will not let you take my mother's locket. You've already taken enough from me. My father slammed his fist on the table. The plates rattled, and a glass of water tipped over, soaking the tablecloth. Emma, you will do as you're told. I am your father, and I am telling you to sign the papers. I stood up so fast my chair toppled backward. The sound of it hitting the floor echoed through the restaurant like a gunshot. Every head in the room turned to look at us. I didn't care. You are my father, I said, my voice shaking but loud. But that doesn't give you the right to steal from me. You didn't build that shop, Dad. I did. You gave up on it years ago. You gave up on me. And now you want to take the only thing I have left. No. I won't let you. I grabbed the manila folder from the table and clutched it to my chest like a shield. If you want to talk about taking, then let's talk about what you already took. My childhood. My mother. My trust. You took all of it, and I let you because I thought you loved me. But this is where it ends. Chloe stood up too, her face flushed with anger. Emma, don't be ridiculous. You're making a scene. You're embarrassing us. I laughed, a hollow, broken sound. Embarrassing you? You're sitting there wearing my mother's locket, trying to steal my business, and you're worried about embarrassment. You have no idea what embarrassment feels like, Chloe. You've never had to work for anything in your life. I turned to my father, my eyes burning with unshed tears. I am a survivor, Dad. You said it yourself. But I'm not surviving this. I'm leaving. I'm walking out of this restaurant, and I'm never coming back. You can keep the shop. You can keep the locket. But you will never have my respect. You will never have my love. And you will never, ever have my forgiveness. I walked toward the door, my legs trembling beneath me. I could feel their eyes on my back, my father's fury, Chloe's smug satisfaction, Aunt Rose's pity. But I didn't turn around. I pushed through the heavy oak door and stepped out into the rain-slicked streets of the city. The cold air hit my face, and I finally let the tears fall. They mixed with the rain, indistinguishable. I clutched the folder to my chest, the evidence of their betrayal heavy in my hands. I had nothing. No shop. No locket. No family. Just a folder full of legal documents that proved how little I mattered to the people who were supposed to love me. I walked for blocks, not knowing where I was going. The city lights blurred around me, neon signs and headlights bleeding together like watercolors. I passed a bus stop and considered sitting down, but I couldn't stop moving. If I stopped, I would break. And I couldn't afford to break. Not now. Not yet. I ended up at a small park, the same park where my mother used to take me when I was a child. The swings were still there, rusted and creaking in the wind. I sat down on one of them, the folder on my lap, and tried to make sense of what had just happened. My father had always favored Chloe. That wasn't new. But this was different. This wasn't favoritism. This was theft. This was cruelty. This was a deliberate, calculated attack on everything I had built and everything I was. And yet, even as the anger burned through me, I felt something else stirring beneath it. A quiet, stubborn voice that refused to be silenced. The same voice that had kept me going through all those late nights in the shop. The same voice that had whispered to me when I was 15 and terrified of failing. You're a survivor. You always land on your feet. But what if I didn't want to just survive? What if I wanted to thrive? What if I wanted to build something so magnificent that they would choke on their own jealousy? What if I wanted to take everything they had tried to steal from me and turn it into something they could never touch? I pulled the folder open, scanning the documents by the dim light of a street lamp. It was all there. The asset transfer. The signature line. The small print that would strip me of every right to the business I had built. But there was something else. A clause I hadn't noticed before. A small loophole buried in the legalese. It stated that the transfer was contingent upon the recipient having sufficient operational knowledge of the business. Operational knowledge. Chloe had none. She couldn't even name the tools in the shop. I smiled for the first time that night. It wasn't a warm smile. It wasn't a kind smile. It was a smile that promised war. They wanted a fight. They were going to get one. But it wasn't going to be a fight they recognized. It wasn't going to be a fight in a courtroom or a boardroom. It was going to be a fight on my terms, in my arena. I closed the folder and tucked it under my arm. The rain was slowing down, and the clouds were beginning to break apart, revealing a sliver of moonlight. I looked up at the sky and made a silent vow. I wasn't going to just survive this. I was going to rise from it like a phoenix. And when I did, my father and Chloe would look up and realize that they hadn't destroyed me. They had given me the one thing I'd never had before, the freedom to become who I was always meant to be. But first, I needed somewhere to sleep. I needed to figure out my next move. I needed to survive long enough to thrive. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know how I was going to rebuild everything I'd lost. But I knew one thing for certain, the woman who walked out of that restaurant was not the same woman who had walked in. Something had broken inside me, but something else had been set free. And that something was going to change everything. The bus dropped me off at the edge of a neighborhood I hadn't visited in years. Maya's apartment building looked exactly as I remembered it, a crumbling brick facade with a flickering streetlight and a front door that never quite closed properly. I stood there in my soaked dress, the manila folder pressed against my chest, and felt the full weight of my situation crashing down on me. I had no car. No credit cards. No savings beyond the few $100s I'd stashed in a checking account for emergencies. The shop had been my retirement plan, my safety net, my everything. And now it was gone, signed away in my absence by a father who had apparently decided I was expendable. Maya opened the door before I could knock. She was wearing pajama pants and an oversized hoodie, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside without a word. Emma, she said, her voice soft but steady. What happened? I saw your dad's post. He's already announcing Chloe as the new owner of Vance Woodworks. He posted it an hour ago. I laughed, a broken sound that didn't resemble humor. Of course he did. Why wait when you can announce your victory to the world? Maya guided me to her tiny sofa and wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. She handed me a mug of hot tea and sat across from me on a worn-out armchair. Tell me everything. So I did. I told her about the dinner, the folder, the locket. I told her about Chloe's smug smile and my father's cold eyes. I told her about walking out into the rain with nothing but a legal document and a broken heart. Maya listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned forward and took my hands. You did the right thing. Walking out like that took guts. Guts, I repeated, shaking my head. It took stupidity. I have nothing now, Maya. No job. No home. No family. I'm starting from zero. No, she said firmly. You're starting from experience. There's a difference. You built that shop once. You can build it again. Better this time. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the exhaustion was settling into my bones, heavy and suffocating. I don't have money. I don't have tools. I don't have a space. I don't even have a change of clothes. Maya stood up and walked to her closet. She pulled out a duffel bag and started tossing clothes into it. You have me. And you have a couch. And you have a brain that's smarter than anyone in that family combined. That's a pretty good starting point. I felt tears prick my eyes again. Maya, I can't just stay here forever. I need to figure out my next move. So figure it out, she said, tossing a pair of jeans at my head. But do it tomorrow. Tonight, you sleep. You cry if you need to. You eat the leftover pizza in my fridge. And then tomorrow, you start building your empire. The next morning, I woke up on Maya's couch with a stiff neck and a head full of plans. I borrowed her laptop and started making a list. The first thing I needed was a temporary workspace. The second thing I needed was a new client base. The third thing I needed was to prove to everyone, especially myself, that I was more than just a shop owner. I spent the next week in the public library, using the free Wi-Fi to research every aspect of the woodworking industry I hadn't already mastered. I studied trends. I analyzed competitors. I scrolled through pages of Pinterest boards and design blogs, looking for a niche I could claim as my own. And then I found it. A growing market for custom, heirloom-quality wooden pieces that combine traditional craftsmanship with modern design. Not furniture. Not cabinets. Small pieces. Jewelry boxes. Keepsake chests. Serving boards with intricate inlays. Things that people would pass down to their grandchildren. I started sketching. Pages and pages of sketches, filling notebook after notebook. Maya watched me from the kitchen, a cup of coffee in her hand. You look like you're possessed. I feel possessed, I admitted. I feel like I'm on fire. That's the fury, Maya said. It's good fuel. Use it. I did. I used every ounce of anger, every drop of betrayal, every memory of humiliation. I channeled it all into my designs. And slowly, a new vision began to take shape. But the anger wasn't enough. I needed money. I needed tools. I needed a space where I could turn my sketches into reality. And I had none of those things. I spent a week calling every woodworking shop in the city, asking if they had any unused space or equipment they could rent me. The answer was always the same, no. Either they didn't have the space, or they didn't trust a stranger with their equipment. I was on the verge of giving up when I remembered Arthur Henderson. He had been my father's partner once, a long time ago. They had started Vance Woodworks together, but Arthur had sold his share and retired years before I took over. I hadn't seen him in over a decade. But I remembered his gallery. Henderson's Art and Antiques, tucked away in the downtown art district. I remembered the way he used to look at my work at trade shows, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He had always seemed to see something in me that others didn't. I found his number in an old address book my mother had left me. I dialed it with trembling fingers, praying he still had the same number. Hello, his voice was gruff, but familiar. Mr. Henderson, this is Emma Vance. I know it's been a long time, but I need your help. There was a pause. Then, Emma. I heard about the dinner. Your father's been making a lot of noise. Are you all right? No, I admitted. But I will be. I have a plan. I just need a chance. Come to the gallery tomorrow, he said. We'll talk. The next day, I walked through the doors of Henderson's Art and Antiques and felt a wave of nostalgia. The place smelled of old wood and lemon polish. Beautiful pieces lined the walls, antique clocks, Victorian sideboards, hand-carved mirrors. Arthur was behind the counter, polishing a bronze sculpture. He looked older than I remembered, his hair entirely white and his face lined with years. But his eyes were sharp and kind. Emma, he said, setting down his cloth. You look like you've been through a war. I have, I said, taking a seat across from him. But I'm ready to fight the next one. I told him everything. My plans. My sketches. My need for a workspace and tools. He listened without interrupting, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up and motioned for me to follow him. He led me to the back of the gallery, through a door I'd never noticed before. Behind it was a dusty, cluttered room filled with old tools and half-finished projects. It's not much, Arthur said. But it's a space. You can set up a pop-up shop here. I'll let you use the back room for your work. I have some old tools, lathes, sanders, a table saw. They're not new, but they work. I stared at the space, my heart pounding. Mr. Henderson, I can't afford to pay you rent. I have almost nothing. I don't want your rent, he said. I want a 10% cut of whatever you sell until you're back on your feet. And I want you to promise me something. Anything, I said, my voice cracking. Promise me you won't let your father win. Promise me you'll build something so incredible that he has no choice but to see how wrong he was. I looked at him, this kind old man who had no reason to help me. I promise, I said. I swear on my mother's memory. I will not let him win. And so I started. I worked in that dusty back room from dawn until midnight, turning my sketches into prototypes. I used Arthur's old tools and sourced materials from his contacts. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. I was fueled by something stronger than caffeine, pure, unadulterated determination. The first piece I completed was a jewelry box. It was small, but intricate, with a hand-carved lid and a velvet-lined interior. I had designed it to look like a miniature house, with tiny windows and a door that actually opened. It was the kind of piece that could become a family heirloom. Arthur watched me finish it, his eyes glistening. Emma, he said softly. Your mother would be so proud. I didn't cry. I had cried enough. Instead, I picked up my next piece of wood and started sanding. The weeks that followed were brutal. I made mistakes. I ruined pieces. I ran out of materials and had to beg Arthur for advances. But I also made progress. Slowly, steadily, my work began to attract attention. A local boutique owner saw one of my jewelry boxes in Arthur's gallery and commissioned a set of 12. A real estate developer ordered custom serving boards for his new luxury condos. Word spread. The Wood Whisperer, they called me. A woman who made pieces with soul. And then came the day I saw my father's face in the newspaper. He was standing outside the old shop, a going out of business sign taped to the window. Chloe had run the business into the ground in less than 3 months. She had alienated clients, sold off equipment, and failed to pay suppliers. The shop was bankrupt. I stared at the photograph, trying to feel something. Triumph, vindication, but all I felt was a quiet, hollow sadness. They had destroyed themselves. They hadn't needed my help. Arthur came up behind me and placed a hand on my shoulder. You could buy it back, he said. The shop. The equipment. It's going up for auction next week. I shook my head. I don't want it back. That place is haunted. But there's something else they're auctioning. Something I do want. Arthur raised an eyebrow. What a locket, I said, my voice steady. My mother's locket. They're selling it too. The auction was held in the old warehouse where I had spent 20 years of my life. I walked through the doors and felt the ghost of my former self brush against me. The machines I had loved were lined up like soldiers awaiting execution. The shelves were bare. The floor was scuffed with years of use. My father was there, standing in a corner with Mark. He looked smaller than I remembered, his shoulders hunched, his face lined with defeat. He didn't see me at first. I had worn a hat and a plain coat, hoping to blend in. The auctioneer started calling out lots. Machines. Tools. Shelving. I bid on a few small items, nothing too noticeable. And then came the final lot. Lot 47, the auctioneer announced. A collection of antique chisels and a silver locket. Sentimental value, folks. Starting bid at $20. I raised my paddle. 50. A man in the back raised his. 75. 100, I said, my voice steady. My father's head snapped up. He was staring at me, recognition dawning in his eyes. But he didn't raise his paddle. He just stood there, frozen, watching as I bid against a stranger for my mother's locket. 200, I said. The stranger shook his head and dropped out. Sold to bidder number 103, the auctioneer announced. Phoenix design. I walked to the front of the room and handed over the money. The auctioneer handed me the locket. It was warm in my palm, like it had been waiting for me. I turned to leave, and my father stepped in front of me. Emma, he said, his voice hoarse. I didn't know it was you. I know, I said, slipping the locket around my neck. That's what makes it so sad. Emma, please. I need to talk to you. I need to explain. I looked at him, this man who had been my hero once. This man who had given up on me so easily. There's nothing to explain, I said. You made your choice. Now I've made mine. I walked past him and out of the warehouse, the locket warm against my chest. I had reclaimed it. I had reclaimed myself. But as I walked away, I felt a strange heaviness settling over me. I had won the battle. I had reclaimed my mother's locket. I had built a new business from nothing. I had everything I had ever wanted. So why did I feel so empty? I walked back to Arthur's gallery and sat down in the back room, surrounded by sawdust and half-finished pieces. I stared at the locket in my hand and thought about my mother. She had always believed in forgiveness. She had always believed that love could heal anything. But could it heal this? Could it heal the wound my father had carved into my heart? I didn't know the answer. But I knew one thing for certain, I couldn't keep living in the past. I couldn't keep letting my father's betrayal define me. I had to move forward. I had to build something new. And maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to heal the wounds that still festered beneath the surface. But first, I had to figure out what healing even looked like. And that was a question I didn't have an answer to yet. The locket stayed warm against my skin for 3 days. I didn't take it off. I slept with it, showered with it, worked with it pressed between my collarbones like a second heartbeat. Every time I reached up to touch it, I felt my mother's presence, a ghost of comfort in a world that had become cold and unfamiliar. But comfort wasn't enough. I needed answers. I needed to understand how my father could have gone from the man who taught me to sand a tabletop to the man who tried to strip me of everything I'd built. And the only person who might have those answers was standing in my new workshop on a Thursday afternoon, looking like he hadn't slept in weeks. Mark showed up unannounced. I heard the bell above Arthur's gallery door chime, and then his footsteps echoing through the front room. I was in the back, sanding the edges of a walnut serving board, when he appeared in the doorway. Emma, he said, his voice hesitant. Can we talk? I didn't stop sanding. I'm busy, Mark. I know. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But please. Just give me 5 minutes. I set down the sander and wiped my hands on my apron. 5 minutes. Starting now. He stepped into the room, his eyes scanning the space. I watched him take in the tools, the half-finished pieces, the sketches pinned to the wall. There was something different about him. He wasn't wearing his usual tailored suit. He was in jeans and a rumpled shirt, his hair unkempt, his face shadowed with stubble. "I didn't know," he said finally. "About Chloe's debt. About Dad's plan. I swear, Emma, I didn't know." I crossed my arms. "You were at the dinner. You heard him. You didn't exactly speak up." "I know. I should have. I should have said something. But I thought," he ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood. "I thought you'd fight it. I thought you'd find a way to win. You always do." "Always do," I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue. "That's what everyone keeps saying. Emma's a survivor. Emma always lands on her feet. It's like you all decided I was invincible, so it was okay to stab me in the back." Mark flinched. I didn't mean it like that. I just thought Dad would come to his senses. I thought Chloe would fail and you'd take the shop back. I didn't think he'd actually go through with it." "Well, he did. And Chloe did fail. And now the shop is gone. So what exactly did you think was going to happen, Mark? That I'd just bounce back and everything would be fine?" He didn't have an answer. He just stood there, looking at me with eyes that held more guilt than I'd ever seen in them. "I came here to tell you something," he said quietly. "About Mom. About the locket." My hand instinctively went to my neck. "What about it?" Mark pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and held it out to me. "I found this in Dad's safe. He doesn't know I took it. I think he forgot it was even there." I took the paper and unfolded it. It was a letter, handwritten, the ink faded with age. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was my mother's. "My dearest Harold, if you're reading this, I'm probably already gone. I don't know how much time I have left, so I need to say what's in my heart before it's too late. I know you love Chloe. I know you see yourself in her, the charm, the ease, the way she lights up a room. But I need you to promise me something. I need you to promise that you'll never forget about Emma. She's the one who will carry us through. She has a strength that comes from somewhere deep, somewhere I can't explain. She's the one who will make us proud. She's the one who will build something beautiful from the ashes. ***. When she was born, I held her and I knew. This child will be great. Not because of what she'll achieve, but because of who she is. She has a heart that refuses to break, even when it should. She has a spirit that can't be crushed. I'm leaving my locket to her. It's the only thing of value I have, and I want her to know that she is my legacy. Not the business. Not the money. Her ***. Promise me you'll see her. Promise me you'll love her the way she deserves. Promise me you won't let your pride blind you to her worth. ***. With all my love. Elizabeth***. I read the letter 3 times, my hands trembling. By the third reading, tears were streaming down my face, blurring the words into watercolor smears. "She wrote this before she died," I whispered. "She wrote this for him." Mark nodded. "I think he forgot about it. Or maybe he couldn't bear to read it. I don't know. But I thought you should have it." I looked up at my brother, this man who had always been a shadow to our father, who had never spoken up or stood out. "Why are you giving me this? Why now?" He shrugged, but there was pain in his eyes. "Because I'm tired of being a coward. Because I watched you walk out of that dinner, and I didn't follow you, and I've hated myself every day since. Because I want to be the brother you deserve, even if it's too late." "It's not too late," I said, surprising myself. "It's not too late, Mark. You're here. That counts for something." He let out a shaky breath, and I saw tears in his eyes for the first time in my life. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to forgive any of us. But I wanted you to know the truth. Mom believed in you. She always believed in you. And Dad, he made a mistake. A terrible, unforgivable mistake. But he's broken, Emma. He's so broken. Broken doesn't excuse cruelty, I said, but my voice was softer now. You don't get to hurt people just because you're hurting. I know, Mark said. I know. But he's losing everything. The business is gone. His reputation is destroyed. Chloe is barely speaking to him. He's alone, Emma. He's finally alone, and he has no one to blame but himself. I looked down at the letter in my hands, my mother's words burning into my memory. She has a heart that refuses to break. I had refused to break for so long that I'd forgotten how to feel anything but anger. But reading her words, hearing her voice across the years, I felt something shift inside me. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my pocket. Thank you, Mark. For this. It means more than you know. He nodded, swiping at his eyes. There's something else. Something I need to tell you about Chloe. About why she really needed the shop. I raised an eyebrow. I thought she was in debt. She is. But it's worse than you think. She's not just in debt, Emma. She's being sued. By a former business partner who claims she defrauded him. The settlement is almost $500,000. Dad didn't just want to help her. He was trying to save her from going to prison. The words hit me like a physical blow. Prison. She's facing prison, not if she pays the settlement. That's where the shop came in. The sale of the building and the equipment would have covered the full amount. Dad thought he was saving her. He didn't think about what it would do to you. He just saw his daughter in trouble and reacted. I sank onto a workbench, the weight of the revelation pressing down on me. All this time, I had assumed my father was motivated by favoritism, by cruelty, by a desire to see me fall. But the truth was more complicated. He had been trying to save Chloe from the consequences of her own choices. He had made a terrible decision, but it hadn't been born entirely from malice. It didn't excuse him. It didn't erase the pain he'd caused me. But it made him human. Flawed and broken and desperate. What are you going to do? Mark asked quietly. I stared at the tools around me, the half-finished pieces, the sketches on the wall. I don't know, I admitted. I don't know what to do with this information. Maybe you don't have to do anything, he said. Maybe you just need to sit with it. Process it. And then decide. He left a few minutes later, and I was alone again, surrounded by the smell of sawdust and the echo of my mother's words. I pulled out the letter and read it once more, my eyes lingering on the final line, "Promise me you won't let your pride blind you to her worth." I thought about my father, sitting alone in his empty house. I thought about Chloe, facing a lawsuit that could destroy her life. I thought about my mother, who had loved us all despite our flaws. And I thought about myself. The woman who had built an empire from a dusty back room. The woman who had reclaimed her mother's locket and her mother's legacy. The woman who had survived betrayal and turned it into fuel. But was survival enough? Was it enough to just keep going, to keep building, to keep proving my worth to people who had already decided I wasn't enough? I touched the locket at my throat and made a decision. I wasn't going to let my father's choices define me. I wasn't going to let Chloe's mistakes consume me. I was going to build something beautiful, something lasting, something that honored my mother's memory and my own strength. And maybe, someday, I would find it in my heart to forgive. Not for them. For me. But first, I had work to do. I picked up the sander and got back to work, the letter tucked safely in my pocket, my mother's words echoing in my mind. I worked late into the night, sanding and shaping and creating. The pieces came together under my hands, beautiful and flawless. And for the first time in months, I felt something other than anger. I felt peace. The bell above the front door chimed again, pulling me from my work. I looked at the clock. It was nearly midnight. No one should be here at this hour. I walked to the front of the gallery, wiping my hands on my apron, and froze. Standing in the doorway, soaking wet from the rain, was my father. The rain was coming down in sheets, plastering my father's hair to his forehead and soaking through his coat. He looked like a drowned man, hollow-eyed and shivering, clutching the doorframe like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "Emma," he said, his voice cracking. "Please. I need to talk to you." I stood there, frozen, my hand still gripping the apron at my waist. Every instinct told me to slam the door. Every memory of that dinner, of his cold eyes and cruel words, screamed at me to walk away. But I couldn't move. There was something in his face, something I hadn't seen in years. Vulnerability. Desperation. The look of a man who had finally realized he had nothing left to lose. "It's midnight," I said, my voice flat. "You shouldn't be here." "I know. I know. But I've been trying to find the courage to come for weeks. I drove past this place a dozen times. I sat in my car across the street and watched the light in your window and couldn't make myself get out. I crossed my arms, the barrier between us." "So why now?" He took a shaky breath. "Because Mark told me he gave you the letter. Your mother's letter." And I realized I couldn't hide anymore. I couldn't keep pretending I hadn't read it. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know what I'd done. I felt the letter in my pocket, a weight against my thigh. "You read it. You read her words, and you still tried to take everything from me." "God, Emma." His voice broke. "I read it 100 times. 1,000 times. I had it memorized. I knew what she asked of me. I knew what she believed about you. And I failed. I failed her. I failed you. I failed everyone." The confession hung between us, raw and bleeding. I didn't know what to do with it. This wasn't the father I remembered, the cold tyrant who had dismissed my work and my worth. This was a man who had been stripped of his armor, left exposed and trembling in the rain. "You should come inside," I heard myself say. "You'll catch pneumonia out here." He stepped through the doorway, dripping water onto the floorboards. I led him to the back room, to the small seating area where I took my breaks. He sat down heavily, his hands clasped together, staring at the floor like it held the secrets of the universe. I got him a towel and a cup of hot tea, the same way Maya had done for me weeks ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was taking care of the man who had tried to destroy me. "Thank you," he said quietly, wrapping his hands around the mug. "You don't have to be kind to me. After everything I did, you don't have to be anything to me." "I'm not being kind," I said, sitting across from him. "I'm being practical. You can't talk if you're hypothermic. So drink your tea and tell me what you came to say." He took a sip, the steam curling around his face. For a long moment, he was silent. Then he set down the mug and looked at me, his eyes red and swollen. "I read the letter the day your mother died," he began. "She gave it to me in the hospital. She made me promise to read it after she was gone. And I did. I read it, and I cried like a baby, and I promised myself I would be the father she believed I could be." "But you weren't," I said. "No. I wasn't. I tried, for a while. I tried to see you the way she saw you. But every time I looked at you, I saw her. I saw her strength, her determination, her refusal to give up. And it broke me, Emma. It broke me because I couldn't save her. I couldn't keep her from dying. And you reminded me of that every single day." I felt the words hit me like stones. "So you pushed me away. You made me feel like I was never enough. Because I reminded you of Mom." He nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I know it doesn't make sense. I know it's not an excuse. But that's what I did. I pushed you away because I couldn't bear to look at you. And then I convinced myself that you were fine without me. That you were strong enough to survive on your own. That you didn't need my love." "I did need it," I said, my voice shaking. "I was a child, Dad. I lost my mother, and I needed my father. And you weren't there. You were never there. I know. I know, and I hate myself for it. Every day. Every single day, I think about all the things I should have done. All the ways I failed you. And then I made it worse. I made it so much worse. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded document. His hands were shaking as he unfolded it and placed it on the table between us. What is this? I asked. Read it. I picked it up and scanned the page. It was a legal document, a letter of intent. It stated that Harold Vance was transferring full ownership of the Vance Woodworks property, including the building, the equipment, and the remaining inventory, to Emma Vance, effective immediately. I stared at the page, my mind struggling to process the words. You're giving it back. I never had the right to take it in the first place, he said. I know it's too little, too late. I know it doesn't undo what I did. But I want you to have it. It was always supposed to be yours. I set the document down on the table and looked at him. Why now? Why didn't you do this before the auction? Because I was a coward, he admitted. I thought if I gave it to you, you'd reject it. I thought you'd throw it back in my face and tell me to go to hell. And I couldn't bear that. So I waited. I waited until I had nothing left to lose. You've never had nothing to lose, Dad. You always had me. You just didn't see it. He broke down then, his shoulders shaking with sobs. I had never seen my father cry. Not at my mother's funeral, not during the years of decline and struggle. But now he sat in my workshop, his head in his hands, and wept like a child. I didn't comfort him. I couldn't. The anger was still there, buried beneath layers of exhaustion and grief. But I also couldn't turn away. I sat across from him and waited for the storm to pass. When he finally looked up, his eyes were raw and red. I don't expect you to forgive me, Emma. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you. I just didn't know how to show it. I felt the words land somewhere deep inside me, in a place I had tried to seal off. You said my work wasn't important. You said I could just find something else to do. I was lying. I was lying to myself, to you, to everyone. Your work is beautiful, Emma. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And I'm so sorry I made you doubt that. I looked down at the document on the table. What about Chloe? If I take this back, she'll go to prison. He shook his head. I found another way. I took out a second mortgage on the house. I used my retirement savings. I sold everything I could. It won't be the same life for her, but she's not going to prison. The news hit me harder than I expected. You sold the house. I have a small apartment now. It's not much, but it's enough. I don't need the house. I never needed the house. I just needed my family. I stared at him, this man who had been my enemy for so long. And I saw, for the first time, how much he had lost. How much he had given up to try and make things right. Dad, I don't know if I can forgive you, I said honestly. I don't know if I can ever forget what you did. But I don't want to be angry anymore. I don't want to carry this weight forever. He nodded slowly. I understand. I'll wait as long as it takes. I'll earn your trust back, even if it takes the rest of my life. I reached for the document and picked it up. I don't want the shop back. He looked up, confusion flickering in his eyes. What? I don't want the building. I don't want the equipment. I've already built something new, something that's mine. I don't need the past to define my future. Then what do you want? I looked around the workshop, at the tools and the sketches and the half-finished pieces. I want a fresh start. I want to build a new legacy, one that's not tainted by everything that happened. And I want you to be part of it. Not as my boss, not as the one who decides my worth. But as my father. If you can do that, then maybe we have a chance. He stood up slowly, his legs unsteady. I can do that. I promise you, Emma. I can do that. Prove it, I said. Prove it by showing up. By being there. By not disappearing when things get hard. That's what I need from you. He reached out, his hand hovering uncertainly, and I took it. We shook, a formal handshake that felt like a contract. "A promise. You should go," I said finally. "It's late. You need to rest." He nodded and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he paused and turned back. "I love you, Emma. I've always loved you. Even when I didn't show it." I felt a tear slip down my cheek. "I love you too, Dad. Even when I didn't want to." He left, and I was alone again. The rain was still falling, but the storm inside me had finally begun to calm. I touched the locket at my throat and thought about my mother's letter. She has a heart that refuses to break. I hadn't broken. I had bent and cracked and nearly shattered, but I hadn't broken. And maybe that was what mattered most. I picked up my sander and got back to work, the document still sitting on the table. I didn't know what the future would bring. I didn't know if I could truly forgive my father, or if I could ever trust him again. But I knew one thing for certain: I was no longer carrying the weight of his choices. I was free. And from that freedom, I would build something extraordinary. The weeks after my father's visit were strange and disorienting. I woke up every morning expecting to feel the familiar weight of anger pressing down on my chest, but it wasn't there. In its place was something I didn't recognize. Emptiness, maybe. Or the quiet before a storm I wasn't sure would come. I threw myself into my work. The orders were piling up, and I had a reputation to maintain. Arthur's Gallery had become a hub for designers and collectors who wanted something unique, something handmade. My pieces were selling faster than I could make them. I had hired 2 assistants, both young woodworkers who shared my passion for the craft. We worked side by side in the back room, the sound of saws and sanders filling the air like a symphony. But even with all the noise and activity, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. I had rebuilt my business. I had reclaimed my mother's locket. I had spoken to my father and found a fragile piece. So why did I still feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop? The answer came on a Tuesday afternoon, in the form of a woman I hadn't seen in months. Chloe walked into the gallery like she owned the place. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor, and her designer bag swung from her elbow. She looked thinner than I remembered, her cheekbones sharper, her eyes hollow. But she still carried herself with the same entitled arrogance that had always defined her. "Emma," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "I was hoping I'd find you here." I set down my chisel and wiped my hands on my apron. "What do you want, Chloe? Can't a sister visit her sister without an agenda?" "No. Not you." She laughed, a brittle sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Fine. You caught me. I came to talk about Dad. And about the shop. And about everything that's happened." I crossed my arms and leaned against my workbench. "I'm listening." She walked around the room, trailing her fingers over the half-finished pieces. "You've done well for yourself. I have to admit, I didn't think you had it in you. All those years of sawdust and splinters, and look at you now. A real artist." "I didn't do it for your approval," I said. "I did it because it's what I love." "Right. Of course." She stopped in front of a jewelry box, the one I had spent a week perfecting. "Dad told me he gave you the property." "The old shop building." "He offered," I corrected. "I didn't accept." She turned to face me, her eyebrows raised. "You didn't accept? Why not? That building is worth a fortune." "The land alone, I don't want it, Chloe. I don't want anything that's tied to the past. I'm building something new." She stared at me, disbelief flickering across her face. "You're insane. You know that, right? You could have had everything, and you just walked away." "I have everything I need," I said quietly. "I have my work. I have my peace. I have my mother's locket. That's more than you'll ever understand." Something shifted in her expression. The mask of arrogance slipped, and for just a moment, I saw the girl beneath it. Tired. Scared. Desperate. "You're right," she said softly. "I don't understand." I don't understand how you can be so strong all the time. I don't understand how you can lose everything and just build it back. I don't understand how you can forgive Dad for what he did. I haven't forgiven him, I said. Not completely. But I'm working on it. She laughed again, but this time it sounded hollow. Must be nice. Being able to work on things. To fix them. I break everything I touch. I broke the shop. I broke Dad. I broke you. I didn't know what to say to that. So I stayed silent and let her talk. Dad told me about the letter, she continued. About Mom. How she believed in you. How she knew you'd be the one to carry us through. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. About how she was right. About how I was always so jealous of you. Jealous, the word tasted foreign on my tongue. You were the golden child, Chloe. Everyone always adored you. They adored the idea of me, she said. They loved the mask. But you were the real thing. You were always the real thing, and I hated you for it. I hated how easily you could do everything I couldn't. I hated how Dad looked at you sometimes, like you were the only child who mattered. I shook my head. He never looked at me that way. He barely looked at me at all. Because it hurt too much, she said. Because you reminded him of Mom. And I reminded him of himself. All the flaws he tried to hide. All the mistakes he made. He saw himself in me, and he hated that. So he tried to fix me. He tried to make me into something better. But you were already perfect, and he couldn't handle it. I felt the words hit me like a wave. All these years, I had believed I was the unwanted one. The forgotten one. The one who had to fight for every scrap of love and attention. But Chloe was telling me a different story. She was telling me that I had always been seen, even when I felt invisible. Chloe, I said slowly, why are you telling me this? She took a shaky breath. Because I'm tired. I'm so tired of pretending. I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of being the villain in your story. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I've done terrible things. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the shop. I'm sorry for the locket. I'm sorry for everything. I looked at her, this woman who had been my rival, my enemy, my constant source of pain. And I saw something I had never seen before. She was just as broken as I was. Just as lost. Just as desperate to be loved. Where are you living now? I asked. She blinked, caught off guard. What, where are you living? Dad said he sold the house. Where did you go? I have a small apartment. It's not much. But it's mine. Good, I said. That's a start. She stared at me, tears welling in her eyes. You're not going to yell at me. You're not going to throw me out? No, I said. I'm not. I'm done with anger, Chloe. It's exhausting. And I don't have the energy to hate you anymore. Then what do you feel? I thought about it for a long moment. I feel sad. For you. For me. For everything we lost. But I also feel hopeful. Because maybe, for the first time, we can start over. Both of us. She broke down then, the tears spilling over. I watched her cry, and I felt something shift inside me. The last walls I had built around my heart began to crumble. I walked over to her and put my arms around her. She stiffened at first, then collapsed into me, sobbing into my shoulder. We stood there in the middle of my workshop, two sisters who had been enemies for so long, finally finding a way back to each other. I'm sorry, she kept saying. I'm so sorry. I know, I said. I know. We stayed like that for a long time. When she finally pulled back, her makeup was ruined and her eyes were red. But she was smiling. A real smile, not the practiced one she wore for the world. Thank you, she said. For not giving up on me. I haven't given up, I said. Not yet. But you need to prove yourself, Chloe. You need to show me that you're serious about changing. I will, she said. I promise. I'll do whatever it takes. I looked at her, this woman who had caused me so much pain. And I made a decision. I have an idea. A new project. I want to create a line of pieces for a charity auction. All the proceeds go to a foundation that helps women rebuild their lives after financial abuse. I could use your help. If you're interested. She stared at me, disbelief in her eyes. You want me to work with you after everything I did? I want to give you a chance to rebuild your reputation, I said. And to show people that you're more than the mistakes you made. That's what I needed once. And someone gave it to me. I want to do the same for you. She nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I'll do it. I'll do anything. Good, I said. We start tomorrow. Get some rest. You look like you need it. She laughed through her tears, a sound that was almost joyful. I do. I really do. After she left, I sat down on my workbench and let out a long breath. I hadn't expected any of that. I hadn't expected Chloe to show up, let alone apologize. But now that it had happened, I felt lighter. Like I had shed a weight I'd been carrying for years. Arthur appeared in the doorway, his eyes twinkling. Well, he said. That was unexpected. To say the least, I agreed. You're a remarkable woman, Emma Vance. You know that I shrugged. I'm just trying to do what's right. That's what remarkable people do, he said. They do what's right, even when it's hard. I looked around the workshop, at the tools and the sketches and the half-finished pieces. My world had been shattered, but I had built it back. And now, I was building something even bigger. A legacy of forgiveness, of second chances, of hope. The charity auction was scheduled for 6 months from now. It would be the biggest project I'd ever taken on. But I wasn't afraid. For the first time in a long time, I felt ready. Ready to create. Ready to heal. Ready to move forward. And as I picked up my sander and got back to work, I knew that whatever came next, I would face it with the same strength that had carried me through everything else. The same strength my mother had seen in me, all those years ago. She has a heart that refuses to break, and it was true. It had refused to break. And it always would. The charity auction consumed my life for the next 6 months. Every waking hour was spent in the workshop, surrounded by sawdust and sketches and the steady hum of machinery. I had taken on more than I could handle, and I knew it. But something about the project felt bigger than me. It felt like a testament to everything I had survived, everything I had rebuilt, everything I still hoped to become. Chloe showed up the morning after our conversation, looking nervous and out of place. She was wearing jeans and a plain t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. No designer bag. No expensive jewelry. Just her, stripped down to the basics. I don't know what to do, she admitted, hovering awkwardly by the door. I've never done anything like this before. Start by sweeping, I said, handing her a broom. The floor is covered in sawdust. Then I'll show you how to sand. She took the broom like it was a foreign object, but she got to work. I watched her from the corner of my eye, waiting for the complaints, the excuses, the inevitable breakdown. But they never came. She swept the floor, and then she sanded, and then she helped me stain a batch of serving boards. She was clumsy and slow, but she was trying. That was more than I had expected. By the end of the first week, she had developed blisters on her hands. She showed them to me with a rueful smile. Is this what your hands looked like when you started? Worse, I said. But I didn't have anyone to show me the right way. You're lucky. She laughed, a genuine sound that surprised us both. Lucky. That's not a word I'd use to describe myself. Maybe not, I said. But you're here. That counts for something. The months passed, and Chloe transformed before my eyes. The entitled woman who had walked into the gallery was slowly replaced by someone else. Someone quieter, more thoughtful. Someone who asked questions and listened to the answers. Someone who showed up every day and put in the work. I didn't forgive her overnight. I couldn't. The wounds were too deep, the memories too fresh. But I started to see her differently. Not as the enemy, but as a fellow traveler on a difficult road. The night before the auction, I was in the workshop alone, putting the finishing touches on the centerpiece of the collection. It was a large wooden sculpture, a phoenix rising from the flames. I had spent weeks on it, carving each feather by hand, sanding and polishing until it gleamed like gold. I was so focused on my work that I didn't hear the door open. I didn't know anyone was there until I heard a voice behind me. Emma. I turned. My father was standing in the doorway, his hands in his pockets, his eyes fixed on the sculpture. Dad, I said, setting down my chisel. What are you doing here? I wanted to see you before the auction, he said. I know I'm not supposed to be here. I know you're busy. But I needed to tell you something. I wiped my hands on my apron and motioned for him to come in. What is it? He walked over to the sculpture, his fingers hovering over the carved feathers. This is beautiful, Emma. It's the most beautiful thing you've ever made. I felt a warmth spread through my chest. Thank you. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, he continued. About proving myself. About showing up. I haven't been good at that. I've been too scared to try, because I was afraid you'd reject me. But I'm done being scared. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. It was beautifully crafted, with intricate inlays and a smooth, polished surface. I made this, he said, holding it out to me. It's not as good as your work. I know that. But I wanted to give you something that came from my hands. Something that showed you I've been trying. I took the box and opened it. Inside was a piece of paper, folded neatly. I unfolded it and read the words to Emma, my daughter, my pride, my heart, I'm sorry for every moment I made you feel small, I'm sorry for every time I looked away, I'm sorry for not being the father you deserved, I love you. I've always loved you. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to prove it, I read the words 3 times. By the third reading, tears were streaming down my face. Dad, I said, my voice cracking. This is. I know it's not enough, he said quickly. I know it can't undo the past. But it's a start. It's me showing up. Like you asked. I looked at him, this man who had been my enemy for so long. And I saw the fear in his eyes, the hope, the desperate need for forgiveness. You made this? I asked, holding up the box. With your own hands? Yes, he said. I took a class. A woodworking class. I wanted to understand what it felt like. What it felt like to create something with your hands. I laughed, a wet, broken sound. You took a woodworking class. I'm not very good, he admitted. The box took me a month. I ruined 3 of them before I got one right. I looked at the box again, at the imperfect joints and the slightly uneven inlay. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close. But it was made with love. That was enough. Thank you, I said, pulling him into a hug. This means more than you know. He hugged me back, his arms tight around me. I love you, Emma. I've always loved you. I know, I said. I know. The auction was held in a grand ballroom downtown. It was packed with designers and collectors, philanthropists and influencers. My pieces were displayed on pedestals around the room, each one glowing under the soft lighting. I stood in the corner, watching the crowd, my heart pounding in my chest. This was the culmination of everything I had worked for. Everything I had sacrificed. Everything I had survived. Chloe appeared beside me, looking beautiful in a simple black dress. Nervous? She asked. Terrified, I admitted. Me too, she said. But I've learned something from watching you. Being terrified doesn't mean you don't do it. It just means you do it scared. I smiled at her. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher, she said, bumping her shoulder against mine. The auction began, and one by one, my pieces sold. Each one went for more than I had expected. The crowd was enthusiastic, the bidding fierce. By the end of the night, I had raised more than $200,000 for the foundation. But the moment I'll never forget came when the Phoenix sculpture was brought out. The auctioneer described it in glowing terms, and the bidding started immediately. It went higher and higher, until finally, it sold for $50,000. The crowd erupted in applause. I stood there, frozen, unable to move. Chloe grabbed my hand and squeezed it. "You did it, Emma. You really did it." I looked around the room, at the faces of people who had believed in me, who had supported me, who had helped me rise from the ashes. Arthur was there, beaming with pride. Maya was there, crying tears of joy. Mark was there, clapping with the rest of them. And my father was there. Standing in the back, his eyes locked on mine. He nodded once, a small gesture that said everything. I had built this. I had created this moment. And I had done it my way. The charity auction was a turning point in more ways than one. The success of the event brought a flood of new orders and opportunities. My business grew faster than I could have imagined, and I found myself at the helm of a thriving company with a team of skilled artisans and a growing reputation for excellence. But more importantly, it marked the beginning of a new chapter in my relationships. Chloe became a regular presence in my workshop, and our bond deepened in ways I never thought possible. We still had our moments, our disagreements and frustrations, but the love between us was real and enduring. My father continued to prove himself, showing up not just for the big moments but for the small ones too. He helped me deliver a custom order when my van broke down. He came to my workshop on weekends and helped me sand pieces, his clumsy hands slowly improving with practice. He was a constant, quiet presence in my life, and I found myself grateful for it. The scars from the past were still there. They always would be. But they had faded, softened by time and effort and the slow work of healing. I had learned that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about choosing to move forward, to let go of the weight that was holding you down. And I had learned something else, too. Something I would carry with me for the rest of my life. Strength wasn't about never breaking. It was about putting yourself back together. It was about finding the courage to keep going, even when you felt like you had nothing left to give. It was about choosing love over hate, hope over despair, forgiveness over revenge. I had made those choices. I had chosen to rise, again and again, no matter how many times I was knocked down. And I would keep choosing it. For myself. For my family. For the legacy I was building, one piece of wood at a time. The morning of the gallery opening, I woke up before dawn and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Today was the day. The day I would unveil my new collection to the world. The day I would prove, once and for all, that I had risen from the ashes of my old life and built something entirely my own. I slipped out of bed and walked to the window. The city was still asleep, the streets empty and quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Somewhere closer, a car engine hummed. The world was waking up, and so was I. I got dressed in the outfit I had chosen weeks ago. A simple black dress with a silver pendant that matched my mother's locket. I touched the locket, feeling its familiar weight against my chest. It had become a part of me, a constant reminder of where I came from and how far I had traveled. The gallery was buzzing when I arrived. Arthur had outdone himself with the setup. The space was transformed, with soft lighting and elegant displays that made my work look even more stunning. The walls were lined with my pieces. Jewelry boxes, keepsake chests, serving boards, and the centerpiece, a massive wooden sculpture of a phoenix in flight. My team was already there, putting the finishing touches on the displays. Chloe was arranging a set of serving boards on a long table, her movements precise and confident. She had come a long way from the woman who didn't know how to hold a sander. "You look nervous," she said, glancing up at me. "I am," I admitted. "This is the biggest thing I've ever done." "It's going to be incredible," she said. "You've worked so hard for this. You deserve every bit of success that comes your way." I smiled at her, feeling a surge of gratitude. "Thank you, Chloe. For everything. For showing up. For trying." She shrugged, but I could see the emotion in her eyes. I had a good example to follow. The guests started arriving at noon. I stood near the entrance, greeting them with a smile that felt more and more genuine with each person who walked through the door. They came in waves: collectors, designers, journalists, and friends. Maya was there, beaming with pride. Mark was there with his wife, his eyes scanning the room with wonder. Arthur stood near the back, watching it all unfold with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had seen his protégé succeed. And then my father walked in. He was dressed in a suit, looking nervous and out of place. He hovered by the door, unsure of where to go or what to do. I excused myself from a conversation and walked over to him. "Dad," I said, taking his arm. "I'm so glad you came." "Wouldn't have missed it," he said, his voice shaky. "This is your moment, Emma. I wouldn't miss it for the world." I led him through the gallery, showing him each piece and explaining the inspiration behind it. He listened intently, asking questions and commenting on the craftsmanship. It felt strange, having him there, but it also felt right. Like a piece of the puzzle had finally fallen into place. "Dad," I said, stopping in front of the phoenix sculpture. "This one is for you." He stared at the sculpture, his eyes wide. "For me, I couldn't have done any of this without you," I said. "Not because you helped me, but because you gave me the push I needed. You made me realize that I had to fight for myself. That I had to build my own legacy. I don't deserve that, Emma. I don't deserve your kindness." "Maybe not," I said. "But I'm giving it to you anyway. Because that's what forgiveness looks like. It's not about what you deserve. It's about what I choose to give." He pulled me into a hug, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I held him, feeling the weight of all the years of pain and struggle and loss. And I let it go. The opening was a success. By the end of the night, almost every piece had been sold. The reviews were glowing, the orders pouring in. I had done it. I had built something extraordinary from the wreckage of my old life. But the best moment came after the last guest had left. I was standing alone in the middle of the gallery, surrounded by the echoes of the evening. The lights were dim, the displays empty. But I felt full. Complete. Whole. Chloe walked up to me, her heels clicking softly against the floor. "You did it, Emma. You really did it." "We did it," I said, turning to face her. "I couldn't have done this without you." She shook her head. "I didn't do anything. I just showed up." "That's everything," I said. "That's the most important thing. Showing up. Being there. Trying." She smiled, and I saw the old Chloe in that smile. Not the entitled, bitter woman who had tried to steal my life. But the woman she was becoming. The woman she was choosing to be. I took her hands and looked her in the eyes. "I forgive you, Chloe. For everything. I forgive you." Tears welled in her eyes. "Emma, I mean it," I said. "I've been carrying this anger for so long. And I'm done. I don't want to be angry anymore. I want to be free. And the only way to be free is to let it go." She pulled me into a hug, holding me tight. "I love you, Emma. I've always loved you. Even when I pretended I didn't." "I know," I said. "I know." Later, I found myself outside, standing on the steps of the gallery. The night air was cool and clean, the stars bright overhead. I touched my mother's locket and closed my eyes. I remembered the night I had walked out of that birthday dinner, broken and raw. I remembered the rain, the cold, the weight of the manila folder in my hands. I remembered the fear and the loneliness and the despair. And then I thought about everything that had happened since. The long nights in Arthur's back room. The blisters and bruises. The tears I thought would never stop. The small victories and the big ones. The people who had believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. I had come so far. I had climbed so high. And I had done it on my own terms, with my own hands, my own heart, my own strength. My father appeared beside me, his hands in his pockets. You okay? More than okay, I said. I'm perfect. He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. You know, your mother always believed in you. She said you were special. I didn't understand it back then. But I do now. I see it in every piece you create. I see it in the way you treat people. I see it in the way you've forgiven me, even though I don't deserve it. Maybe you don't deserve it, I said. But that's not the point. The point is that I'm choosing to give it to you. Because that's who I am. That's who I want to be. We stood there in silence, side by side, two people who had been through so much and survived. The stars continued to shine overhead, indifferent and eternal. But I felt connected to them, in a way I never had before. You're my legacy, Emma, my father said quietly. Not the business, not the money, not any of that. You're my legacy. And I'm so proud of you. I felt tears prick my eyes again. Thank you, Dad. That means everything. I looked back at the gallery, at the windows glowing with soft light. Inside, my family was waiting. Chloe, Mark, Maya, Arthur. All of them. All of us. We had been broken, but we had put ourselves back together. Not perfectly, but beautifully. Not without scars, but with strength. I thought about my mother, the woman who had always believed in me. I thought about the letter she had left behind, the words she had written in the final months of her life. And I understood, for the first time, what she had meant when she said I had a heart that refused to break. I had refused to break. I had refused to give up. I had refused to let the world destroy me. And now, standing on the steps of the gallery, surrounded by the echoes of my success and the love of my family, I knew that I would never be broken again. I had been forged in fire, shaped by pain, polished by hope. And I was ready for whatever came next. I turned to my father and smiled. Let's go inside. We have a family to celebrate. He nodded, taking my arm. Together. Together, I agreed. We walked back into the gallery, the door closing softly behind us. And as I looked at the faces of the people I loved, the people who had helped me rise from the ashes, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I had done it. I had survived. I had thrived. And I had done it my way. So if you're out there, reading this, and you're struggling. If you feel like the world is against you. If you've been betrayed and hurt and broken. Remember this. You are stronger than you think. You are braver than you believe. And you have everything you need to rise. I did. And so can you. If this story touched you, hit like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe, because your story isn't over yet. And neither is mine.